We are assembled here today to pay final respects to our honored dead. And yet it should be noted that in the midst of our sorrow, this death takes place in the shadow of new life, the sunrise of a new world, a world that our beloved comrade gave his life to protect and nourish. He did not feel this sacrifice a vain or empty one, and we will not debate his profound wisdom at these proceedings. Of my friend, I can only say this. Of all the souls I have encountered in my travels, his was the most human. Others? Hup.
All right, there we go. Well, like life itself, here we find ourselves in our study of the Torah come full circle. It was a year ago, Torah time, that I began Torah time, and it was on this portion, Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah, that I began our discussions and our presentations. So here we are again. And luckily for us, the nice thing about Torah is that even if you go over it multiple times, there's always something new to talk about. That's very good for you, and it's excellent for a rabbi to be able to always find something new and novel to talk about. I think I've used the phrase before, the Torah doesn't change year from year, but we do. But truthfully, there are so many different things going on in any given Torah portion that there's always a place to focus that we haven't focused before. And that's precisely what I plan to do here. So what we're going to be discussing is, based on the inspiration coming from Spock, I can never not cry when that scene is shown, the burial of Sarah. And I think actually our friends in the Star Trek universe give us a nice lead in with this idea that death and life go together, that there is new birth that comes from death, etc., etc. And that's certainly something of an element of what's going on here. So what happens? We're informed that Sarah dies in Hebron, in Kiryat Arba, or the village of four. There's already some discussion within the commentators. Why is it called the village of four? Some say that it's named after four biblical giants that lived in the area. Others claim it's because four of the patriarchs and matriarchs will be buried in the area, which is prophetic, because how would the founders of Kiryat Arba know that? In any case, that's neither here nor there. Abraham immediately goes out to the magnates, the property owners of the territory, and asks to purchase a cave for the burial of his wife Sarah. That cave is called Machpelah. Now, Rashi immediately notes that Machpelah means double. Double what? We're, again, an interpretive opportunity, a homiletic occasion. And so, the sages say, oh, this is where all the couples will be buried, the zugot will be buried. And so it's a double portion. Rashi, it's a twofold cave. And then it becomes a debate. Is it a split level cave, one layer on top of another, or is there one chamber and then one chamber beyond it? Who knows? All right. That's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about is the textual significance of Abraham burying Sarah. The Torah spends a great deal of time on this story. And so this is not like any other death or burial that we see within the Torah, which all happens very quickly and within a few verses. Rather, we are allowed to be there sitting in on the negotiations for the purchase of the cave of Machpelah. And right away, the fact that we spend so much time on this is significant in itself. So, what can we derive from this idea of Abraham negotiating? Well, actually, let me describe to you what's going on. So, Abraham seeks out the magnates of the land. It quickly becomes clear, talking to them, he gives a very flowery and oriental speech about, you guys are so awesome and I'm just this humble wayfarer. And eventually they identify a guy named Ephraim the Hittite. Now, the Hittites are a people. We should know this. Hittites are a people, a varying empire that's grown and shrank, coming out of Anatolia, out of the area that we would call northern Syria and Turkey. And sometimes their territory would expand south. Sometimes it would shrink. The Egyptians, at certain key periods of times, found themselves in conflict with the Hittite Empire and fought battles with them. But in any case, they are part of the ethnic makeup of the land of Israel, actually still the land of Canaan, that Abraham has entered and God has promised to him. So, Abraham opens up the discussion. He says, I'm nobody. They, in response, start talking about him as the elect of God, selected by God, chosen by God. Maybe the first time we have this idea of being a choice or chosen person, a treasured people appears here. So even the people living in the land recognize that Abraham is something special. Now, maybe this is just all, again, Oriental flourish, but in any case, everybody's complimenting everybody else, and right away the negotiations begin. And Ephraim offers the cave to Abraham gratis, for free. Just take this. We all know that you're a great person. Mourning your dead, bury your dead. It's an opening gambit, or is it a genuine offer? It's not clear. Maybe this is the beginning of this classic experience of handling. Anybody who's been to the land of Israel knows that you're going to find yourself not purchasing something at the purchase price, but receiving an initial pitch, and then you have to negotiate it down. I love, there was a merchant in the Shuk coming out of the old city. I used to live in the old city, and I'd have to travel through the Shuk to get to Hebrew Union College. And there was one guy who would always say to me, "Sir, is it my day to rip you off?" Which was a great opening line, right? And he's a lovely guy. I did eventually buy something from him. But in any case, this is the opposite. Instead of coming in with a ridiculously high price to be negotiated down, he comes and makes the offer of something free. Now, maybe that was genuine. Maybe that's just another opening gambit. That would be shameful for Abraham simply to take something that was gifted to him. Or maybe, and I think this is part of the sort of proto-Zionist element of the story, is that Abraham feels that he has to purchase some land so that he can claim to be a property owner in the land that God has promised him. Now, is he doing this in order to fulfill God's promise through his own actions? Is it because he's feeling a little annoyed at God that God has not gone ahead and fulfilled his promise? So he is taking matters into his own hand, or he's even embarrassing God? I don't know. But in any case, Abraham clearly feels the need to pay for this property. He wants to have a deed of ownership. He doesn't want to remain a sojourner in the land. So negotiations begin. And before things go too far, it ends up that Ephraim offers a bid of purchase it. What's it between you and me? 400 shekels. 400 shekels is not nothing. It's not chopped liver. That's a lot of money in the ancient world. And certainly for a piece of property with a cave on it, which probably is not very arable land, the cave itself is certainly not worth 400 shekels. But Abraham immediately accedes to that. He accepts that offer and he pays out the 400 shekels, telling us, one, money is not an object to Abraham. He's one heck of a sheik back in that time. But also, I think it's important to Abraham that it be clear to all the witnesses and all the witnesses that follow that he didn't manipulate, he didn't prevaricate, he wasn't cheap about this, that he paid the asking price in order that he could say, I am legitimately now a resident of this land, and no one can dispute that. And so the deal is made, and Machpelah becomes the cave for Abraham's family, not just for Sarah, for the entire family. So we will see that subsequent generations of matriarchs and patriarchs are buried there. Now, we have three explicit cases here of matriarchs and patriarchs being buried at Machpelah. The first one is Sarah. And then Abraham follows afterwards, and we're told later in the Torah that Ishmael and Isaac come together to bury their father there in the cave. So this is, I don't know, this is about the land. This is about the Israelites and later the Jewish people claiming to be legitimate heirs to the land. Now, the second one is the story of Jacob. Now, Jacob is brought down to Egypt in order to be with his family, where they endure a famine, but they stay on. And Jacob is quite insistent with his family that he be buried at Machpelah with his ancestors. That's less about the land and more about family. So this illustrates the importance of burial as a family tradition, and probably, if we're going to go way back to this late Bronze Age tradition, we know that Semites of all varieties, of different ethnicities, preferred to be buried on family property together. And since the phrase that appears in the Hebrew Bible is to be gathered to one's kin, it has been theorized, I think very persuasively, that the earliest Israelites believed that in the afterlife we would all be gathered together as a clan group. And that is why you all want to be buried on the same property, so that you can share the afterlife with your family. So it's a family matter. I always compare this to the scene from Mulan, where Mulan goes out to the shrine where all the ancestors dwell, and they provide her with advice. Maybe in early Israelite times, Israelites would go out to their family burial site and they would commune with the ancestors to get wisdom and guidance. We don't know. We can best speculate. My professor Hanan Brichto, may his memory be for a blessing, wrote I think, the most persuasive argument on this back in the 1950s, an article called Kith, Kin, and Burial in Ancient Israelite Tradition. So anyway, so I just gave you a quick snapshot of that idea. So Abraham is looking to the land and his presence and claim to the land. Jacob is looking to family and holding the Israelites together in the afterlife as well as in this life. The third reference to this is indirect. It is Joseph who makes his brothers promise that after I die, you will take me up. Now, he never mentions Machpelah. He doesn't specify what it means to be taken up. But already in Genesis, the verb for traveling between the land of Israel and the land of Egypt, the verbal structure for that journey has already been established. You go down to Egypt and you go up to the land of Israel. All right. That's why we say to this day, when someone is traveling to Israel or settling in Israel, we say it's aliyah. Aliyah is the Hebrew verb Allah, to go upward. All right. And that's why El Al is called what it's called. So by saying, you will take me up, he is telling the brothers, you need to get me back up to the land of Israel, presumably to the cave of Machpelah. And maybe this third form of burial at Machpelah is not about the past, whether it be land or family. It's about the future. Joseph, in effect, gives his brothers and their descendants a task, which is to not forget where we came from. They're doing pretty well in Egypt at this point, at the time that Joseph dies. It's a fertile land, and they've been welcomed, and everything is good. So it's not impossible that they might forget God's promise, that they might ignore the fact that they have their roots up in the land of Israel. So Joseph assigns them a task that will require them, that obligates them to return to the place of their origin. And that, in fact, is exactly what happens. It just takes 400 years. So in the book of Exodus, we see that it's mentioned specifically while the people have been liberated, they've been told they can leave, they're putting all their stuff together, everybody's gathering their stuff, their carts, their goat herds, their limited number of personal possessions. We are told specifically that Moses goes out and finds the bones of Joseph so that he can take those bones with them as they go. So Moses fulfills the promise that the brothers made to Joseph, and the people will return to the land. So it's always good to have a project, to have a task. And this complex of three burials maybe is telling us something about Jewish values. Number one, that we should value the land of Israel, the place we came from, that it is not nothing, that has a significant role in the history of our people, and we should honor that. That we always need to remember family, because family is the essence of what sustains the Jewish people year in and year out, decade to decade, life cycle to life cycle. And finally, that for us to be an eternal people, we always need to be looking to the future. We always have to have future plans. and future hopes and aspirations, and Joseph represents that. So this trifecta of burials actually conveys an essential lesson about what it is to be a Jew. And of course, going back to our dear friend Spock, Leonard Nimoy, our primary Jew in the Star Trek universe, that in fact burial is not the end, it is the flourishing of new possibilities. And so it has been for us that 2,000 years after our people were expelled from the land of our origin, we're back. We're back. We may be the ever dying people, but we're the ever resurrected people too, and that's pretty remarkable. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you for taking time to listen to this, and we'll just keep going with future Torah portions, and I'll try not to repeat myself as we go into the coming year. Boker Tov, everyone.